Okay, thank you so much, Jenny. And good evening, everybody. Before we do anything else, we'll do a quick round of intros from our side. My name is Shanali Govender. I am based at the University of Cape Town in the Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching, and I have the great privilege of working with Daniela and Chengwen on what we call the BOLD project, which is an attempt to take a PGDIP in blended and online learning and create it as a series of micro courses that are open to people signed up for the PGDIP, people with short course interests, people with prerequisites that allow them into the degree program, people without prerequisites that do not typically allow them into the degree program. And so we've been using that for thinking a bit with today. So as I said, my name's Shanali. Daniela, I'm going to hand over to you, and then Chengwen after.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. My name is Daniela. I work with Shanali and Jingwen and others in the room. Stephen and Andrew are also in our team, and we have some of our students here, Elanka or participants, more better to say, and Vali. So it's really nice that you're here, and it will be lovely to hear your perspectives on this program. So our talk is entitled Radical Flexibility, a Bold Proposition. And we are suggesting a participatory parity perspective, which is one social justice framework we find useful to think with in our context on, as Shanali said, a postgraduate diploma that we are busy developing and will be offering for the first time next year, that kind of challenges many of the established ways and structures and boundaries in higher education. And it's a really interesting space to be in, but also very, very challenging. So we are really, very appreciative of the space here to help us think in this about flexibility in this program.
And then Chengwen, if I could invite you to unmute, turn your camera on, say hi, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, so I'm Chingwen. I'm part of the team, and I guess I'm convening the first short course from the BOLD program, Designing with AI. We started with last year. So yeah, thank you for having us.
Okay, thanks so much. So folks, there are three of us nominally presenting, although it's more like being in conversation with each other. So if at any point you have a question or a comment, we would invite you certainly to either ask it in the text chat if that's how you're comfortable, or to kind of unmute, raise a hand, and we'll take it as we go so that we don't leave people behind at any point. So please feel free to jump in either in the text chat or to unmute, and we'll try and respond as quickly as we possibly can. So before we do anything else, our little plan for this evening, we want to do a quick check-in, see how folks are doing, kind of just arrive in the room after, for the people in this hemisphere, a full day at work. And for the people who are on the other side of the world in the States, thank you for being with us so early in the morning. So we'll do a quick check-in and just kind of arrive. And then a very quick sort of introduction to the two concepts that we've kind of hung on to in this process, which is Valencianus's idea of radical flexibility, and then the idea of and then Fraser's ideas around social justice, particularly participatory parity. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms and ask you to sort of think with those two ideas and come back to us with some thoughts. So before we do anything else, I'm going to invite you to engage in what some people call a text fall and other people call a waterfall. If somebody said flexibility to you, so flexibility in higher education, flexibility in life, just this idea of flexibility. If someone said flexibility to you, what does this mean to you? And take a moment. You can put in some words in the text chat. You can throw in some emojis. However you want to respond in the text chat, entirely up to you. So what does it mean? What are you associated with? Take a moment and type. And then we will count ourselves in and see where our ideas land. So when I say flexibility, what pops into your mind? Okay, and let's take, as soon as we've got, take a moment, type, and then enter. Let's see what we have. So I see Mira saying the ability to bend. One of my favorite sayings that I whisper to myself very often is, that which bends is not always weak. Daniela laughs because she knows that I'm not very good at this. So ability to bend, creative solutions, thinking outside of the box, shunning rigidity as a first impulse. Stephen is saying enough options that you can make it work with your life. Ilanka was saying the ability to adjust a schedule to meet personal and work requirements. Jenny, the ability to adjust or change depending on who you're dealing with and what you're doing. So not unnecessarily rigid. Chengwen saying chewing gum. Yeah. Vali, inclusion. Irene having different perspectives. Okay, so one of the things that we're very aware of is a word like flexibility has both all of these wonderful connotations. The idea of being able to kind of compose our world in different ways, not being too rigid, but incorporating different perspectives and inclusivity. But we're also really aware that an idea like flexibility can often kind of get co-opted by the system to do things that perhaps we didn't necessarily always intend for it to do. And so thank you for sharing your ideas about flexibility. And I think what I'm going to do at this point, Daniela, do you want me to keep sharing slides? And you
Yes,
can just
please. That
yell
would,
when you
yeah.
want me to
Sure.
change. Cool. So Daniela, over to you.
Thank you. So as Shanali has already said, our aim with this program, this new PGDIP, is to offer as much flexibility as we can. That was like how we started this whole journey towards this program. We have been teaching on postgraduate diploma programs for a while, and they have usually a very defined and run-of-the-mill structure. So our typical PGDIPs have, 4 courses, 30 credits long. Either they run over a semester or they run over a term. There's very little choice. It's very linear. So we have been teaching in this ways for a very, very long time. And when we started thinking about the PG board, this postgraduate diploma, all we wanted is to offer more flexibility. But the moment you say flexibility and the moment you get into that space of flexibility, the first thing people associate with it with is very like the neoliberal agenda, flexibility, short courses, micro credentials. It's all about employability, about skills. So people get immediately very, very worried. Or so the first reaction we get when we share these ideas, say in the School of Education, the first thing is like, this is like we just go down income generation and massification of higher education. And it's often really not a way like in our it's really market-driven imperatives, adaptability to economic demands, efficiency, individualization, personalized learning. So when we got this kind of resistance, we really stopped and started thinking, because this is really not what we want to do. We wanted to offer flexibility, but in terms of allowing people choice in content and topics and being aware of the different contexts that our participants come from. So for us, flexibility was much broader than just thinking skills and micro credentials and short courses and getting degrees quickly and without much, deepening of learning. So we were looking for other ways of looking at flexibility or other readings or concepts or frameworks we could use. And one of the readings we got drawn to was Valenciano's and Holden's idea about radical flexibility. And it's not very concrete, it's quite weak, but it's a beautiful counter story to that neoliberal argument of flexibility. They say, they call it radical flexibility, and it's very much framed by concerns around relationality, justice, trust. and advocating for the kind of systemic changes we need to make education really flexible and open and meaningful for all. So these are just some quotes from their papers. They say radical flexibility means taking seriously the nature and purpose of learning itself at a fundamental level of human life, where human life is understood to be enmeshed relationally with all that goes on around, with and through it. In other words, radical flexibility is a backdoor into thinking, not just about how to deliver education equitably, but also to ask what kind of education we actually want to deliver. What kind of university do we want? What kind of life? What kind of future? And this is really what we are trying to do. We are trying to reimagine education in a way that, would be more meaningful, would be more open to to both what we can offer, what we should offer, what our participants want to offer, would allow us to be more responsive to the needs of participants, and to create a broader understanding and a deeper understanding of flexibility, just than the usual flexibility in distance education, which is like the flexibility of mode and delivery and time, and students learning at their own pace whenever they want and what they want. So we were really trying to do something different. So, as mentioned now many times, BOLD is this new postgraduate diploma we are offering from next year, and it's on blended and online learning design. So it's a very new field. We used to teach one course in our postgraduate diploma in EdTech on online learning design, but now we are offering a whole degree because the demand is there and the field is kind of emerging, but it's not very clear what it is when we talk about blended and online learning design. So we are attracting people from all over, from different contexts, from within higher education, but also from schools, from NGOs, from edtech companies, from the corporate world. So it's a really diverse mix of participants that we are attracting. So, and if you look at the way we describe BOLD, it's compared to when we did our benchmarking with other similar degrees, one of the things that were really important for us is this idea that we are committed to socially just frameworks. So we're not just offering blended and online learning, we are committed to think about equity, about social justice, because that's really important in our context, which is the global south, it's Africa. So we are not just offering a run-of-the-mill blended and online learning design program, but something that is very contextual, very sensitive to our own context, our cultures, our inequities that we're dealing with every day. So BOLD has four big clusters, four clusters: learning design for social justice, designing digital habits, critical and caring reflective perspectives on learning design, and design-based research. I think that's not in the exact career. They have changed slightly, those terms. But the important thing is so what we have decided to do, instead of our 30 credit courses that we usually offered, we offer 10 credit courses. So it's 6 weeks short courses. Some are compulsory, some mandatory, so that students have choice to pick from. If you go to the next slide, Shanali. So these are 4 clusters, and each cluster has a range of short courses, and we're hoping to offer more short courses as we continue and as needs arise. And students can choose 3 out of each cluster. Some are compulsory, some are optional, but they can choose them in any sequence, in any combination, however it works for them. They can choose, they can do however many per year, whatever, depending, as I think Stephen said, whatever fits in their schedule. The only thing that's fixed is that they have to do cluster 4 at the end and in sequence. Everything else they can do, as works for them. And yeah, so I speak a little bit later about how it's both short courses and PGDIPs, but I think I'll stop here and let Shanali take over, unless there are any questions so far. Are there any questions?
So I'm
I'm not
wondering whether
sure. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it. Is that yeses?
No,
Or
that's fine. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was wondering whether anyone would like to think or reflect or comment at all on that idea of radical flexibility.
One challenge that I'm kind of in the middle of right now is that whenever I found there are a lot of great programs in the world, but when you stop and look at the program, the issue would be the funding. So have you considered any flexibility as to how students are going to be doing that in terms of how they're going to be funding their diploma education? And I understand that question might be critical, so if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
No,
We
I
will.
think if you wouldn't mind holding on to the question for one slide,
Okay.
we will definitely talk to how we've tried to address it. I think it's one of those persistent problems, call them really difficult to resolve in our context, certainly problems. But I
Okay.
do think we have some strategies.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I'm wondering if anyone else has comments or questions before we move forward. Ilanka, jump in, please feel free.
Hi, Shanali. Thank you so much. Lovely to listen
Nice
more
to
to
see
your thinking and your design about it. As you were
you.
talking through, and I must say, I'm going to read up more about radical flexibility. I haven't explored the concept, and I would like to know more. But as you were talking through it, it reminded me of something I encountered a couple of years ago when I did an advanced certificate. And that is Lisa Marie Blaschke's work on utagogy. So there's I don't know if you've encountered that,
Yeah.
the move from pedagogy, andragogy, utagogy, although it's not recognized formally as a learning theory yet, but the whole concept of not self-directed learning, but self-determined learning, in terms of the participants being able to co-design or determine what it is they want to learn. Did that play a role in your design at all?
So I think weirdly enough, what we thought about quite a lot was who might come on the program and how might their needs be different from other people on the program. And so we landed up, each of us kind of, or as a group, we landed up with these 6 personas, and Chengwen will talk about them in a moment. And so lots and lots of our decisions, including things like the structure, the finance, what eventually lands up inside the courses, is in no small part determined by the fact that we have these different kinds of people coming on the program, and we wanted to try and give them as much space as possible to make choices about what they would study. And one of the reasons we walked away from the 30 credit model, like the 30 times 4 model, was that in that case, you've got this 30 credits, not notionally 300 hours of everybody's doing the same thing to some extent. And we wanted to try and break that up as much as possible. So certainly, while I don't think that we came to it necessarily from a Hutagogy type perspective, and I'll let Daniela jump in because maybe she did, for me, it came from who are the people and how do we give them choice to design a particular version of this degree that makes sense for their trajectory out of, through the degree and into the rest of their professional lives. Daniela, I don't know if you want to jump in, or Ilanka, please go ahead
Yeah,
first.
sorry, I just
Mm,
want to ask a follow-up before Daniela jumps
mm,
in. So one of the other challenges I have in looking at designing an accredited program is in terms of the qualification accreditation criteria. The more flexibility we give, the more difficult it is to manage towards learning outcomes and to ensuring a consistent learning experience that people say, hey, it's an equitable process. We all achieved certain learning outcomes. How do you reconcile giving that radical flexibility, more choice, with meeting our South African qualifications framework requirements in terms of meeting certain learning outcomes? Because that's something I've been grappling with for a while.
So I've spoken for a bit, and I wonder if Daniela wants to jump in. I have some thoughts, but Daniela, maybe you want to jump in first.
It's a tough one, especially because our programs can always be taken by short course participants or PGDIP participants. So, and they might, they don't necessarily look for the same thing in a course. So to manage that, to hold these different spaces that give people choice and, give them exactly what they need at the specific time and to adhere to all the accreditation criteria is a real difficult dance that we are busy trying to figure out really in our pilot courses. But one of the things we had to be very clear is what the PGDIP's outcomes are, the exit level outcomes, and how the different courses can lead to the exit level outcomes, and where there is choice, the courses lead to similar exit level outcomes, but maybe with a different focus depending on what context you're from. So the core courses, the compulsory courses, are the ones that are really carrying the main weight towards the exit level outcomes, and the electives kind of support and help participants gain experience in whatever they're actually interested in. But it is, I don't know, Shanali, please jump in, but it is something that's one of the biggest thorny points for us, how to hold these different personas, as Shanali mentioned, who want very different things from this space.
And I think the other thing that was quite kind of challenging to work with in some ways was to think about whether the course was about what people knew or whether the course was about, at the PGDIP level, what could people navigate or what could they do or what was their orientation. So I think that to a large extent, we leaned our learning outcomes into what can people do? What can they figure out in the moment rather than do they know X? So rather than saying, can somebody describe this learning theory and discuss it, critique it, etc., we kind of generalized up a step to questions or to learning outcomes like more focus on the field. So the student is able to navigate the field of learning theories rather than the student is able to describe a particular learning theory. Because our students are in the space where things are changing constantly.
All the time.
And they live in a space where the demands on them are so varied that what almost felt more important was that their orientation as a professional in the space and the skills that they develop to navigate that space felt more important than do they know to click this button here. And that's something that we kind of hold on to quite hard in the course, is how do we help our students to zoom out and look at their own learning in that big picture way. Yeah. Okay. Let me move us forward. I'm wondering if anyone has any comments before we move on. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands and I'm not seeing anything in text chat. So I'm going to move us along. Daniela, are you going to talk about the participatory parity, the first bit, or would you like me to?
You can start off as
Okay,
often.
sure. Okay, perfect. So one of the frameworks that we used to try and ask ourselves, how do we make radical flexibility happen? Because radical flexibility is this lovely, like aspirational, this is how we want learning to be kind of theory. And we needed to ground it in practicalities a little bit. And so we turned to Fraser's idea of participatory parity, which she defines as the capacity to participate in society as peers. I'm sorry, please excuse the typo on the slides. And where all the relevant social actors can participate as peers in social life, and where both the outcome and the process are fair. She has this kind of three-dimensional theory, which I'm not going to talk about in any great detail. Suffice it to say that she considers or asks us to consider what are the economic dimensions that either enable participatory parity or hinder it? What are the cultural dimensions, i.e. the elements of our identity, the recognition or misrecognition of these? And then finally, What are the political or aspects of the political dimension, such as representation, that in one way or another enable us to either create more or less conditions of participatory parity. And then she gives us this really useful concept of affirmative or transformative. I think of it as interventions, probably not the right word, but the changes that we make, are they affirmative or are they transformative? And by affirmative, she means things that make things better for now. So to go back to Yasser's question for a second, affirmative might be giving people a bursary or a scholarship. It kind of fixes the problem for now. And then what do we do when the money runs out, as it almost inevitably does? Is there some way that we can transform the system so that people have a little bit more agency and control over something like finances? So Fraser differentiates between these two things. Affirmative changes don't disrupt power structures, don't really change the system in any significant way, and transformative changes do result in some kind of fundamental transformation. Now, we fully acknowledge that in other parts of the world, there's lots and lots of micro-learning that happens, but in the South African context, particularly in the high-status, traditional higher education sector, very little. There are a couple of campuses that do interesting things with micro-learning, but it's not widespread by any means. And so, or micro-credentialing in relation to learning. And so that's what we're going to sort of focus on a little bit today. This is an answer to Yasser's question, which was, what did we do in terms of economics? So Fraser's very clear that one of the things you need to consider is this idea of the distribution of resources. So what does it cost to take a conventional degree in, and I'm going to talk about a couple of examples. So in the UCT context, a PGDIP in, for example, educational technologies costs somewhere around just under 50,000 Rand for the full program. Typically what happens is that if you are an international student, you've got to pay that 50,000 Rand plus the international fee. Additionally, over and above that, you also need to be able to pay your deposit and so on. For a lot of our students, particularly the people that we thought we would be attracting into, thank you, Daniela, into the PGDIP EdTech, 50,000 Rand is a significant amount of money. It is more than many households in the South African context would live on for multiple months in the year. And so that is one of those things which immediately, as a single outlay of cash, excludes an entire range of students from study. And so one of the things that we did, and I'm just going to flick back to an image here, is that each of the courses that are part of BOLD cost 5,500 Rand each to take as a short course, which means that what a student could do is that they could scatter up to 6 of the BOLD courses as short courses for up to 2 years before starting a PGDIP. In effect, what we think that will do is, or what we hope it'll do, is what it will allow students to spread out the cost of study over a period of time that historically they would not have been allowed to do with a conventional PGDIP arrangement. So we looked at one of the big gateways to study, which is, can you put together enough money to pay your deposit in order to study? And we thought to ourselves, well, how can we split this up in some way? Because what we know is that the South African government does not typically have enough funding to pay for things like PGDIPs. We also know that postgrad funding, where there is funding, goes to masters and PhD students. And so PGDIPs are notoriously underfunded. But we also know that our students do work. They don't work full time. they do work full time, but they have to support families on that money. And so we figured out what would be an amount of money that somebody could save over a couple of months in order to take at least one of the short courses and see their way into it. And so a student could, over time, spread out over 2 years, take up to 6 of the courses before they started on the PGDIP. And that has resulted in students who otherwise might not have been able to enter the PGDIP expressing interest in this particular track. We're still at the early stages, so we'll see how it affects our intake as we go on. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Chengwen to talk about the cultural dimension quickly.
Right. So Fraser talks about the cultural dimension as being a misrecognition kind of identities, but not only identities, probably beyond that, values. So it actually represents a systematic denial of a person's status as a full participant. So they, in the quote, it says, Fraser points out that people can also be prevented from interacting in terms of participatory parity by institutionalized hierarchies of cultural value that deny them the requisite standing. So in other words, cultural inequalities can include all forms of discrimination that privilege some and disrespect or stigmatize others, for example, along the lines of gender, race, language, ability, nationality, religious or ethnic lines. So what we try to do in BOLD is that we have attempted to design for recognition of diversity. So kind of recognizing cultural and social attribute or resources that students or participants bring with them. So these can include like commonly considered dimensions such as race, gender, and class, but also other dimensions such as job roles and experiences, urban or rural locations, and digital literacies, and so on. So in the next slide, we kind of point out to kind of a few strategies we employ to design for flexibility and allow for recognition of diversity. And the first one there is making diversity visible. So it says from persona to course buddy. So what we BOLD has a diverse target audience, so they range from like educators, trainers, learning designers, educational technologists. In the next slide, you'll see the 5. We initially started with 5 personas, and we've recently added a 6th one to consider our RPL candidate, and they come from different contexts, like the Sarah's from NGO, there's Talia from the EdTech, Martin from higher education, Johan from the corporate context, Unati from the school context, and Lewis is our newest one from also I think the multimedia context. So we kind of try to take these design for these kind of personas. So personas are like fictional characters. They kind of act as an archetype to make visible the needs and goals of the larger group. So initially, these were personas there to enhance kind of give a sense of belonging and kind of foreground diverse epistemological histories and so on. And then later we turned these personas into what we call course buddies. So they would walk along the journey of the 6 weeks, the short courses are 6 weeks with the learners. And more we've tried to build in a component where the learners can kind of add to the personas of these, what kind of creating more character to these personas by putting in input fictions along readings and so on. So that's some personas that we try to build in to take into account of kind of the cultural recognition. But then there's Build Your Bold. So I think this has been mentioned already. We kind of design for flexibility. So you can start with short courses. These are 10 credit courses and then stack out towards a full graduate diploma if desired. We've also tried to be flexible with time. So traditionally, I think dates of application and timetabling can be quite inflexible. So with BOLD, you can register for a short course at any time prior to the duration of the course. So it's not fixed to institutional deadlines. Also, we have attempted to kind of include supplemental success activities. These include orientation and coaching sessions. So when people enter the first year of PG BOLD, they're required to engage with what we call an orientation module. So these are self-paced and non-credit bearing, and they provide information of what the program will be about. Then during the actual courses, so besides webinars you have to attend in the duration of the course, there's also what we call coaching session, which function more like tutorials, and they kind of offer additional support. And then lastly, we've talked about the assessment. So we tried to bring in diversity in assessment. So we mentioned about the two parallel pathways. So there's the PG Bold and the short course. So in our courses, we've designed to design with this dual structure in mind, kind of a scholarly track and a practitioner track. And where possible, we've tried to prioritize like authenticity and inclusivity and student agency. So yeah, working with this, and I think, as mentioned, it's been quite hard to navigate in this kind of the practitioner track. What would that look like? What are the scholarly track? What would that look like? And are we meeting the standards of a PGDIP and so on? But yeah, we're working towards it. Okay, that's it. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Daniela for the next part.
Yeah, so very quickly, I see the time is running. The political dimension for Frasier is really about who is allowed to take decisions, who is invited to the table to make decisions, and who is not, where the boundaries sit. So with BOLD, what we realized very quickly is that we are trying to push so many institutional boundaries, and we are trying to change the system in a way that we can't do it by ourselves. So one of the most important things for us in terms of the political dimension, is to understand who do we need on our table to help us push these really often radical ideas, like transferring non-credit bearing courses into a formal credit bearing program, which has never been done. So all of these things needed support. So one of the things was to map out the stakeholders at the institution to see who do we need, where do we need buy-in, where are our allies, how can we push this on an institutional level. And one of the things was, luckily, the continuing education policy was busy being revised, so we kind of piggybacked on that. But the other thing is the whole idea of co-creation with our participants. We're offering many courses, as Shanali has mentioned, or designing with AI, where the content is constantly moving. So we can't be experts across all these different contexts and across all these different concepts. So one of the things we do a lot is co-create the courses with our students, with our participants, create a lot of space where they can bring in their experiences, their tools, their practices, their approaches that they use, and share with their other colleagues. One last thing, Shanali, do you want to move on? We have spoken about the stackability of courses. Another one?
One more?
I think Tingwen has spoken about the stackability, but one last thing is for students who don't meet the entry criteria into the PGDIP, what we have offered is an RPR route, so a recognition of prior learning route, which allows students to join one of the courses that are part of PG Bold, which is called Becoming a Learning Design Professional. And in that course, all PG Bold participants do their personal professional development plan. But for RPL candidates, this is an opportunity to work on their portfolio. So they go through the 6-week course, create their portfolio, submit it, and if they are accepted, if their portfolio shows enough evidence that they can actually join an NQF Level 8 program, although they might not have the entry certificate, the entry criteria, they can move into the PG Bold, and they've already done a course. They've already gained 10 credits. If they are not accepted in the program, they still have a short course certificate, and they have done some sort of personal professional development plan for themselves. So in everything we do, we try and make sure that our students get as much benefit out of that, whether they get accepted into the program or not. So that was really a very quick overview of how we have thought about Frasier in relation to our course. And these are just some examples for the kind of economic, cultural, the political dimensions that we have considered for BOLD. And we have about 20 minutes left. So Shanali could you take us into a breakout room, maybe 10, 15 minutes, just put us in 3 different groups. RIS is recognition.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
So I don't think we have time for big collective harvesting, but Shanali, do you have one checkout question for us?
Oh, a checkout question for everybody. I'll give people 2 questions. and they can see which one they would like to leave with. Was there anything that you heard about that you could try some version of in your context? Or, so check out version 1. Was there anything you heard about and you thought, oh, I could try that? Or alternatively, are you doing anything in your context that you're like, no, man, these people must try that? So are you doing anything that you really want us to know about? Or was there anything that we talked about where you thought, ah, that's interesting, I'll give that a try? And I would love to see if there were any, and if anyone wants to do that with their voice, they are so welcome to. If you want to drop them into the text chat, that's also great as well. Okay.
So I'm not in the position that I'm doing something because I'm still studying, finalizing my degree. But one thing that I'm, kind of thinking about and is just a lot of ideas related to social justice and how we can not stop at those theories as just fixed concepts, but rather as dynamic ones, using the dynamism that we get into from social justice and parity of participation and all that, and make them work in every context. My also connection to that, I've read a lot of work on system theory. I've read I can't remember the paper. I wish I could be able to link to it. Daniela wrote something on wrote something on systems theory, but it was part of a paper on learning design. And I still connect that to social justice and all that. So I'm kind of hopeful to know more about how one can just leverage all these points of connection together and make something more meaningful.
Thank you, Yasser. Really appreciate the comment. And I see Ilanka is saying the text chat that she'd like to explore the idea of unbundling aspects of our program into micro-credentials to get more flexibility in the learning process. Ilanka, that sounds really exciting. And I think one of the things that we would probably invite you to is just to see us as conversationalists, as part of your thinking team. If at any point you want to reach out to us and we hang out and do some design thinking together about how you can unbundle things. Because I think that one of the things that we unequivocally discovered in this process of trying to create this highly flexible program was it was just too much to hold in any single person's head any longer. And we've had to create this kind of distributed process of who knows what, and who can call on whom for what piece of information that has been critical to us being this far into the process. We hope that it will continue to hold us up as we make our way through the first year of the full process. But yeah, so thank you so much for the idea, and we would love to keep in conversation with you about it.
Thank you, Shanali. I'm going to take you up on that.
Yay! There will be coffee or tea.
Oh, great.
Cool. I don't know if there's anyone else with comments or if we should hand back to our lovely hosts. From our side, I think I want to just say thank you so much to everybody who's joined us tonight and everyone who has created a space for us to think out loud. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm going to hand back, I think, to Yasser, who is hosting for us, to say thank you very much. And from our side, a very grateful thank you for the space.
Thank you. And I put a link for feedback. Yasser did too a little earlier. So people
Thank
who
you, Jenny.
attended, if you give feedback, and yeah, that was very interesting, and it does sound like a lot to manage and think about, but also exciting to give people more opportunities.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Stay
Bye.
Thank
warm.
you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.